President of the General Assembly, Secretary General, heads of state and government, ladies and gentlemen. We've gathered here because the time has come. The time has come to free the 48 hostages detained by Hamas. The time has come to stop war, the bombing in Gaza, the massacres, and the fleeing people. The time has come because there's a pressing urgency everywhere. The time for peace has come because we're just a few moments away from no longer being able to seize peace. This is why we have gathered here today. Some might say it's too late. Others might say it's too early. But one thing is certain. We can no longer wait. In 1947, this assembly decided on the splitting of mandatory Palestine across two states, a Jewish state and an Arab state, thus recognizing the right of each of them to self-determination. The international community granted to the state of Israel at last fulfilling the destiny of this people after millennia of roaming and persecution, and Israel founded a beautiful democracy there. The promise of an Arab state to date remains unfulfilled. Since then, there's been a long path of hope and despair intertwined, which Israelis and Palestinians have gone down, each in their own way. We have walked alongside them, each of us in keeping with our history and our sensibilities. But the truth is that we bear a collective responsibility for, to date, having failed to build just and lasting peace in the Middle East. This is what became evident to us on the 7th of October 2023, when the Israeli people suffered the worst terrorist attack in its history. 1,224 men, women, and children killed, 4,834 men, women, and children injured, 251 men, women, and children taken hostage. The cruelty of Hamas and all those who collaborated in this massacre dumbfounded Israel and astounded the world. The 7th of October remains an open wound for the Israeli soul and for our universal conscience. We condemn it unequivocally because nothing, never, nowhere can justify having recourse to terrorism. Minds go out and hearts go out to the victims and their families. We've expressed our compassion to all Israelis and first and foremost demand for all hostages still held by Hamas to be freed unconditionally. The French paid tribute to the 51 French men and women assassinated on that day and all other victims of October 7th. We will never forget them, never. Just like we will never stop the existential fight against anti-Semitism. The French people know the sting of terrorism, and our hearts remember the expression of the bonds of brotherhood following the terrorist attacks committed in Paris on the 7th of January 2015, when dozens of foreign leaders were in the ranks of those offering their sympathies, among which the Israeli Prime Minister and the President of the Palestinian Authority. We know that you cannot show weakness in the face of terrorism, but we also know the perils of endless wars. We know that right must always prevail over might. We know from our own history that the commitment, a universal commitment to peace, is the legacy of centuries gone by and the only way towards salvation. And on behalf of our friendship with Israel, our commitment to which has never faltered in the name of our friendship with the Palestinian people, for whom we want the initial promise of the UN Charter to be fulfilled, we want two states living side by side in peace and security to become a reality. However, currently Israel is further extending its military operation in Gaza with the stated objective of destroying Hamas. But there are hundreds of thousands of people who've been displaced, injured, famished, traumatized, Their lives are still being destroyed. Although Hamas has been considerably weakened, and despite the fact that negotiations on a permanent ceasefire are the surest means of ensuring the release of hostages, nothing justifies the ongoing war in Gaza. Nothing. On the contrary, everything compels us to definitively end it, since we didn't do it earlier. We must do this to save lives. The lives of Israeli hostages detained in atrocious conditions, the lives of hundreds of thousands of Palestinian civilians who are tormented by hunger, suffering, the fear of dying, mourning for their loved ones. We must save all lives, because for almost 2 years now, it is the denial of the humanity of the other and the sacrifice of human life which have prevailed. Yes, since the 7th of October, it is the life of the other that is being denied. We've been saying this since the first day of the war in Gaza. A life is a life. I know this because I held in my arms the families of hostages I met in Tel Aviv and in Paris. I'm thinking of the mother of Eata David, a hostage who was famished and displayed. I'm thinking of Nimrod Cohen, a 19-year-old hostage whose father I just met. I also know this because I was at the bedside of the Palestinian victims of Israeli military operations, refugees in Al Arish, women and children. I will never forget the way they looked at me. I know this because I met young people from Gaza who we are hosting in France. I'm thinking of Rida Baroud, who should have been with us today, who continues to be a witness to the distress of her loved ones in Gaza. A life is a life. We are duty bound, all of us, to protect each other. This duty is indivisible, just as our common humanity is indivisible. There is a solution, a way of breaking the cycle of war and destruction. It lies in the recognition of the other, of his and her legitimacy, humanity, and dignity. We must reopen our eyes and see human faces there where war has deposited the mask of the enemy or the marks of a target. We must recognize that Palestinians and Israelis are living in twin solitude, the solitude of the Israelis following the historic nightmare of the 7th of October 2023, and the solitude of Palestinians at their wits' end in the face of this ceaseless war. The time has come, because the worst could still come to pass. The sacrifice of more civilians, the expulsion of the people of Gaza to Egypt, the annexation of the West Bank, the death of hostages detained by Hamas, or facts on the ground which could irreversibly change the situation there on the ground. This is the very reason that today, here in this chamber, we must pave the way for peace, because since July of last year, developments have accelerated. And at this point, we have reason to fear that the Abraham Accords, the Camp David Accords, could be called into question by Israel, and that peace would become impossible for a long time yet in the Middle East. It thus falls to us this historic responsibility. We must do everything within our power to preserve the very possibility of a two-state solution. Israel and Palestine living side by side in peace and security. The time has come. This is why, true to the historic commitment of my country to the Middle East, to peace between the Israelis and the Palestinians, this is why I declare that today France recognizes the state of Palestine.
Cette reconnaissance
This recognition is a way of affirming that the Palestinian people is not a people too many. On the contrary, this is a people who never says goodbye to anything, as Mahmoud Darwish said. A people with a strong history, roots, and dignity. The recognition of the legitimate rights of the Palestinian people takes nothing away from the rights of the people of Israel, who France supported from day one, and to the respect of which it is staunchly committed. This is why we're so convinced that this recognition is the only solution that will allow for Israel to live in peace. France has never wavered standing by Israel's side, even when its security was at stake, including when there were Iranian airstrikes. This recognition of the state of Palestine is a defeat for Hamas, just like for all those who foment anti-Semitism, nurture anti-Zionist obsessions, and who want the destruction of the state of Israel. This recognition by France goes hand in hand with others which will be announced today, and I thank them: Andorra, Australia, Belgium, Canada, Luxembourg, Malta, Monaco, Portugal, the United Kingdom, San Marino. They are here today. They answered our call issued in July and took the responsible choice, the necessary choice, the choice to opt for peace. Spain, Ireland, Norway, and Sweden are also going down the same path, and many others did before us too. This recognition paves the way for useful negotiations, useful for Israelis and Palestinians. This path is a path towards a peace and security plan for all. France and Saudi Arabia submitted this plan to this assembly, and it adopted it by a large majority. It carries our common ambition to break the spiral of violence and to change the situation on the ground. We managed to take a step towards one another, to move away from our habitual stances and to set concrete objectives. We must now set in motion a cycle of peace that meets the needs of all parties. The top priority of this peace and security plan, and it's very urgent, that is to ensure the release of 48 hostages and put an end to military operations throughout the territory of Gaza. I commend the efforts undertaken by Qatar, Egypt, and the US to achieve this. I ask Israel to do nothing more that would thwart these efforts coming to fruition. Hamas was vanquished on the military front as we neutralized its leaders and decision makers. It must also be vanquished politically to be truly dismantled. As soon as a ceasefire is agreed, we must mount a massive collective effort to provide assistance to the people of Gaza. I'd like to thank Egypt and Jordan for their commitment and recall Israel's absolute obligation, that is to facilitate humanitarian access to Gaza, to assist its population, which has lost everything. The second priority is to stabilize and to rebuild Gaza. A transition administration incorporating the Palestinian Authority, as well as the young people of Palestine, together with security forces, the establishment of which we will accelerate, will have the monopoly over security in Gaza. It will implement the dismantlement and disarmament of Hamas, and this with the support of international partners and the necessary means required for this difficult mission. France stands ready to contribute to an international stabilization mission, as well as to support, together with our European partners, the establishment and equipping of Palestinian security forces. As soon as negotiations permit, the Security Council could decide to deploy a civilian and security support mission, liaising with the Palestinian authorities and with the consent of the Israeli authorities. Furthermore, it'll be up to the state of Palestine to give hope to its people, tested by years of violence and occupation, division, and negligence. It will be up to the state of Palestine to give its people a framework for democratic expression, a framework that's been renewed and that is secure. President Mahmoud Abbas committed to this before Prince Mohammed bin Salman and myself. He forcefully condemned the terrorist attacks committed on the 7th of October 2023. He reiterated his commitment to disarming Hamas and committed to excluding Hamas from future governance in Gaza, as well as from future governance throughout Palestinian territory. He reaffirmed his commitment to combating hate speech and promised an in-depth overhaul of Palestinian governance. France will pay close attention to the full implementation of all of the commitments made to us. This renewed Palestinian Authority is a necessary prerequisite for the success of the indispensable negotiations we'll need to resume to come to an agreement on each of the final status issues. It's within this framework that I will be able to decide to open an embassy to the state of Palestine as soon as all of the hostages detained in Gaza have been freed and a ceasefire has been established. What France will be demanding of Israel will be just as considerable. Together with our European partners, we will be pegging, that is, our level of cooperation with Israel to the provisions, the measures Israel will be taking to put an end to the war and negotiate peace. It's thanks to this path that we will get a state of Palestine which is sovereign, independent, and demilitarized, bringing together all of its territories, recognizing Israel and being recognized by Israel in a region which will at last see peace reign upon it. What I also expect of our Arab and Muslim partners who have not yet done so is for them to uphold their commitment to recognize the state of Israel and to engage with Israel in normal relations as soon as the state of Palestine has been established. In so doing, together we will demonstrate dual recognition for the benefit of peace and security of all in the Middle East. Ladies and gentlemen, this is our peace plan. It establishes a demanding mechanism to end the war and enter into the negotiations phase. It allows for Israeli-Palestinian peace to be the first pillar of a new peace and security architecture in the Near East and the Middle East. It lends credibility to the possibility of further economic integration. Nothing will be possible unless the Palestinian authorities take full ownership of our renewed ambition so that we can at last achieve the two-state solution. I know that they're reluctant. I know that they harbor fears. And with the utmost respect, I hear the Israeli people, their sadness, their fatigue, but I want for the Israeli authorities to also hear this and to in turn take on commitments. I know that the Israeli people and the Israeli leadership have the strength to do this. I remember when I was a young man, when I learned of the horrible assassination of Yitzhak Rabin, almost 30 years ago. He was killed for wanting peace. When death was about to claim him, the heroic warrior of the state of Israel said, and I quote, I fought so long as there was no chance of peace, end of quote. But today, there is such a chance. Today, here, 142 states are proposing this peace. They're extending out their hands, ready to be shaken. So yes, the time has come to put an end to the war in Gaza. Massacres, death, right now. Urgency is what drives us. The time has come for Israel to live in peace and security from the Galilee to the Red Sea, through the Dead Sea and the Lake of Tiberias and Jerusalem. The time has come to no longer talk about the existence of the state of Israel. It's self-evident. The time has come to do justice to the Palestinian people and thus to recognize the state of Palestine, a brotherly country, a neighbor in Gaza, in the West Bank, and in Jerusalem. The time has come to cast out from these lands the vile face of terrorism and to forge peace. Yes, to forge peace. This is what has brought us here today. And we're very hopeful that we will be able to forge it. It is a choice we must make. It is our duty. Peace is much more difficult. It demands much more of us than all wars. The time has come.
Merci pour votre attention.
Thank you for your kind attention. I now invite His Royal Highness, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Saudi Arabia. He will be speaking on behalf of His Royal Highness Prince Mohammed bin Salman bin Abdulaziz Al Saud, Crown Prince and Prime Minister of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
In the name of God, the merciful, the compassionate, Your Excellency, President of the Republic of France, Your Excellency, Secretary General, Your Excellency, President of the General Assembly, distinguished guests. God, peace and blessings be upon you. I have the honor to deliver the statement of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia as a co-chair of this conference on behalf of His Royal Highness Prince Mohammed bin Salman bin Abdulaziz Al Saud, Crown Prince and Prime Minister of the Kingdom. It is my pleasure to convey to you the greetings of His Majesty King Salman bin Abdulaziz Al Saud, the custodian of the two holy mosques, and his wishes along with the Crown Prince's wishes for the success of this conference. We thank His Excellency President Macron and His Excellency Antonio Guterres for their efforts towards achieving the two-state solution. We thank him also for recognizing the state of Palestine. This conference is convened under the joint and co-chaired by the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and France. At the time when the Israeli occupation authorities continues their aggression and their brutal crimes against our brothers, the Palestinians in Gaza Strip, and its violations in the West Bank and Al-Quds al-Sharif, and its repeated attacks on the sovereignty of Arab and Muslim countries, the latest of which was the attack against Qatar. This underlines the insistence of Israel to continue with its aggressive practices that threaten regional and international peace and stability and undermine efforts of peace in the region. This reiterates our deeply rooted conviction that the implementation of the two-state solution is the only way to achieve just and permanent peace. The historic position of His Excellency, the French President, to recognize the state of Palestine, and the fact that many countries have taken the similar courageous position, and the broad support for the resolution of the General Assembly to adopt the declaration, the New York Declaration on the peaceful settlement of the question of Palestine and the implementation of the two-state solution that received 142 votes in its favor reflects the will of the international community to render justice to the Palestinian people and consolidate their legal, historic right in line with international frameworks, relevant UN resolutions, and the Arab Peace Initiative. The Kingdom is keen on continuing its partnership with France and all countries calling for peace to follow up on the implementation of the outcomes of this conference, to put an end to the war in Gaza and stop all unilateral measures that threaten Palestinian sovereignty, to work on ending the conflict in the region and establish a Palestinian independent state on the 1967 borders with East Jerusalem as its capital. In conclusion, we thank again those countries that have recognized or have announced their intention to recognize the state of Palestine. We call all other countries to take a similar historic step that will have a great impact on supporting the efforts towards the implementation of the two-state solution, achieve permanent and comprehensive peace in the Middle East, and find a new reality whereby the region can enjoy peace, stability, and prosperity. Thank you.
Je remercie
I thank His Royal Highness Prince Mohammed bin Salman Abdulaziz Al Saud. I now invite His Excellency, Mr. Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations Organization, to issue a statement.
Distinguished co-chairs, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I thank the government of France and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia for convening this international conference on implementing the two-state solution. I also want to acknowledge the Palestinian delegation and once again note my disappointment that they were denied the opportunity to be fully represented. Excellencies, let's have no illusions. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict has gone unresolved for generations. Dialogue has faltered. Resolutions have been flouted. International law has been breached. Decades of diplomacy have come up short. The situation is intolerable and it is deteriorating by the hour. We are here today to help navigate the only way out of this nightmare, a two-state solution, where two independent, sovereign, democratic states, Israel and Palestine, live side by side in peace and security with their secure and recognized borders on the basis of pre-1967 lines, with Jerusalem as the capital of both states, in line with international law, UN resolutions, and other relevant agreements. I welcome the measures many member states are taking to galvanize support for the two-state solution, including the pledges to recognize the state of Palestine. And I welcome the General Assembly's endorsement of the New York Declaration. Excellencies, nothing can justify the horrific 7 October terror attacks by Hamas or the taking of hostages, both of which I have repeatedly condemned. And nothing can justify the collective punishment of the Palestinian people or any form of ethnic cleansing, the systematic decimation of Gaza, the starvation of the population, the killing of tens of thousands of civilians, most of them women and children, and hundreds of our own humanitarians. I call once again for an immediate and permanent ceasefire, the immediate and unconditional release of all hostages, and the immediate, full, safe, unconditional, and unhindered humanitarian access. Excellencies, nothing can also excuse developments in the West Bank that pose an existential threat to a two-state solution. The relentless expansion of settlements, the creeping threat of annexation, the intensification of settler violence, all of it must stop. The situation is morally, legally, and politically intolerable. We must recommit ourselves to the two-state solution before it is too late. A solution in which two independent, contiguous, democratic, viable, and sovereign states are mutually recognized and fully integrated into the international community. Excellencies, those who stand in the way are obligated to answer a fundamental question. What is the alternative? A one-state scenario where Palestinians are denied basic rights, expelled from their homes and their land, forced to live under perpetual occupation, discrimination, and subjugation? How is this possible in the 21st century? How is it acceptable? This is neither peace nor justice. It will only increase the growing isolation of Israel on the global stage. And let's be clear, statehood for the Palestinians is a right, not a reward. and denying statehood would be a gift to extremists everywhere. Without two states, there will be no peace in the Middle East, and radicalism will spread around the world. Excellence,
Excellencies, this conference must mark a turning point. It must pave the way for irreversible progress to put an end to the illegal occupation and to make good on our collective aspiration for a two-state solution. All of this is fully in line with adherence to international law. It has been approved by the General Assembly and supported by the international community. It is the only credible path towards a just and lasting peace between the Israelis and the Palestinians, and the only credible path towards peace and security throughout the Middle East as a whole. This will demand difficult decisions be taken from us all. This will demand courage and leadership based on principles from all sides. I urge you to do everything in your power to allow the two-state solution to prevail. This for the peoples of Israel, Palestine, and for humankind as a whole. I thank you.
Je remercie
I thank the Secretary General of the United Nations Organization. I now invite Her Excellency Annalena Baerbock, President of the General Assembly, to make a statement.
Your Excellency President Emmanuel Macron, Your Royal Highness Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, Your Highness Prince Faisal bin Farhan, Mr. Secretary General, Excellencies. Taking over the presidency of the General Assembly, I received many letters. One moved me deeply. Attached to it were drawings by 3 Palestinian children, Remas, Enas, and Tretal. The images were heartbreaking. One showed a school before and after, beneath a bright sun and a blue, clear sky. In the first, the school with open doors and happiness. In the second, their school lies in rubble. A lone boy stands on the debris of what must be once have been his safe place. Perhaps he had a favorite class, a favorite teacher like our children, a best friend he played with there. Now, all of it is gone. All of the laughter of the children blown away. At that age, children should not be drawing pictures of war. Children should be learning mathematics. They should be playing with friends and scratch dragons or castles, not death and destruction. Yet for the children of Gaza, this is their reality. Their horror lasted and lasts for over 700 days. Tens of thousands have lost their lives. Tens of thousands of dreams which never will come true. So many killed without the world even learning their names. Until we heard one voice so loud we could not overhear it. The voice of Hind Rajab, captured in a phone call with the red crescents while shelling rained down. After the car she was in was attacked over and over again, killing her aunt, uncle, and 3 of her cousins next to her. She called over and over again, I'm so scared. Please come. The rescuers tried to calm her as they tried to reach her. They could not. Hind was killed before help arrived. The world failed her. As the world has also failed Kfir Bibas and his brother Ariel. Kfir was just 9 months old. The youngest child abducted by Hamas on October 7th, taken with his 4-year-old brother Ariel and their mother. Both were killed in Gaza by terrorists. The world will remember their names as symbols of innocent childhood stolen by terror. I've met with the families of the hostages, fathers, mothers, siblings, aunts, grandparents, still waiting for their loved ones to come home from wherever Hamas is holding them after more than 700 days. I've also met with Palestinian families, fathers, mothers, siblings, aunts, and grandparents, whose loved ones are buried in the ruins of Gaza. Their message is always the same. We want peace. Or as one Israeli mother told me, it does not bring my child back if a Palestinian mother loses her child in Gaza. Humanity is not about choosing sides. It's about recognizing that every life matters the same. A life is a life. A Palestinian girl's life is alive. An Israeli boy's life is alive. All the children of the Middle East deserve to grow up knowing only the sun shining on their schools, the laughter of their friends in the playground, and the joy of a meal shared with their families. Not the horrors of starvation, not the horrors of war and terror. Excellencies, the General Assembly has been very clear. We need an immediate, unconditional, and permanent ceasefire in Gaza now. Israel must immediately facilitate the full, rapid, safe, and unhindered entry and delivery of humanitarian assistance to all Palestinian civilians. Hamas must immediately and unconditionally release all remaining hostages. But the horrors of Gaza make equally clear that we cannot allow such devastation to happen again. While the situation in Gaza is unacceptable, settlement expansions and demolitions in the occupied West Bank, including East Jerusalem, are eroding any prospects for a political solution. The decade-long Israeli-Palestinian conflict cannot be resolved by endless war, permanent occupation, and recurrent terror. The only way to ensure that future generations of both Palestinians and Israelis can live in peace, security, and dignity is the two-state solution. As the Secretary General said, it's a right, not a reward, to live in your own state, as all humans around the world. We know that some think this is naive. The first resolution on this matter is almost as old as this organization. 78 years ago, the General Assembly adopted Resolution 181, laying the foundation for two states, knowing it's the only way for peace. And to those of you who argue now, but we have tried for decades and failed over and over again, there can be only one answer. If we would stop aiming for what is right because we have not succeeded yet, then evil would prevail. That would be the end of this institution. This institution which promised to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war. It would erode the UN's foundational mission to achieve peace, justice, and equal rights for both Israelis and Palestinians. Excellencies, that is what today's conference and the New York Declaration are so crucial. The message we are sending today is no, we are not giving up. The international community does not only remain committed to the two-state solution, we are also identifying tangible, time-bound, and irreversible steps for its realization. And we are willing to take decisive measures and provide international guarantees. Of course, this conference and the New York Declaration will face criticism. Some will say a piece of paper cannot change realities on the grounds for Palestinians. Others will dismiss the vision of two states outright. But the fact remains, the New York Declaration was endorsed by 142 member states. And this majority clearly says the war in Gaza must end now. It condemns the attacks committed by Hamas against civilians on 7th of October. It condemns the attacks by Israel against civilians and civilian infrastructure in Gaza. It calls on Hamas to end its rule in Gaza and hand over its weapons. A sovereign and viable state of Palestine needs to be established, living side by side with the state of Israel in peace and security, with mutually recognized borders and full regional integration. Excellencies, the call for peace and the two-state solution is not an abstract. Not for the children watching missiles destroy their school. Not for the families waiting for news that their sons and daughters might be released from captivity. Not for the UN staff in Gaza who have witnessed their colleagues shot. Not for those who have been injured or maimed and will have to live with the trauma of this conflict for the rest of their life. It's an aspiration, but it's also an obligation. We owe it to the memory of Finn, Kfir, and Ariel, and the many, many others. And we owe it to the children like Remas, Enas, and Rital, and all the children of Palestine and all the children of Israel, hoping for a better tomorrow, so that they may not inherit rubble, grief, and despair, but safety, dignity, and hope, to live one day in peace, side by side.
Je remercie Madame.
I thank the President of the General Assembly. I now invite His Excellency Mahmoud Abbas, President of the State of Palestine, to deliver a statement via video conference.
Thank you. Your Excellency, President Emmanuel Macron, Your Royal Highness, Prince Mohammed bin Salman Al Saud, Your Highness, Prince Saud Faisal bin Farhan, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Your Excellency, Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General of the United Nations, distinguished leaders and heads of delegations, peace, mercy, and blessings of God be upon you. On behalf of the State of Palestine, I would like to express my deepest appreciation for the co-presidency, the United Nations, and all participating states for the historic New York Declaration that was issued during July's conference and adopted by the General Assembly by an overwhelming majority. It marked the beginning of an irreversible path towards ending the humanitarian catastrophe and ending occupation, pursuant to international legitimacy and the Arab Peace Initiative. It was the embodiment of an independent state of Palestine with East Jerusalem as its capital, living side by side with Israel in peace, security, and good neighborliness. The declaration stressed that the war against our people must come to an immediate and durable end. It noted that the crimes emanating from the siege, the starvation, and destruction cannot be a means of achieving security. Therefore, we call for a permanent ceasefire. We need to ensure humanitarian access through the United Nations and UNRWA. We need to guarantee the release of hostages, all hostages and prisoners, with the withdrawal of the occupation forces from Gaza. We need a start without delay of Gaza and the West Bank reconstruction through the Cairo International Conference. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we would like to commend the Egyptian-Qatari US mediation that tries to put an end to this war. We also commend the positions of Egypt and Jordan, who reject the displacement of Palestinians, a matter rejected by the international community as well. The State of Palestine is the only entity eligible to assume full responsibility for governance and security in Gaza. This comes through an interim administrative committee affiliated to the Palestinian government in the West Bank, with Arab and international support and participation. Hamas will have no role in governing. Hamas and other factions must surrender their weapons to the Palestinian Authority. What we want is one unified state without weapons, a state with one law and one legitimate security forces. We stress our condemnation of the occupation's crimes. We also condemn the killing and detention of civilians, including Hamas's actions on October the 7th, 2023. On the other hand, we call for an end to the settlements, the annexation, settlers' terrorism, and the attacks against Islamic and Christian holy sites. We condemn the occupation policies that isolate Jerusalem, Al-Quds, and expand construction on Area E1. We condemn the narrative, the Israeli narrative on Greater Israel, which flouts international law. It represents a direct threat to Arab national security and international peace. This comes in addition to the brutal aggression against the sovereignty of the brotherly state of Qatar and other Arab countries. This necessitates a firm deterrent international stance. Ladies and gentlemen, the State of Palestine continues to adopt a comprehensive reform agenda promoting governance, transparency, the rule of law, and the reform of the financial system. It also works on the reform of educational curriculum in line with the UNESCO standards, and this will be achieved within 2 years. We're establishing a unified social welfare system after the abolition of all previous payments to the families of prisoners and martyrs. This system is currently undergoing international audit by a specialized international firm. We underline our commitment to organize presidential and parliamentary elections after the end of the war And within 1 year, we will draft an interim constitution within 3 months to ensure the transfer of power from the authority to the state. This will ensure that no party or individual will participate unless they adhere to the political program and the international commitments of the Palestine Liberation Organization and the rules of international legitimacy. The elections will be held under international observance. Ladies and gentlemen, we desire a modern democratic state based on the rule of law, pluralism, power sharing, equality, justice, and the empowerment of women and youth. We commend the positions of those countries that recognized the state of Palestine. We call on those who have not yet done so to follow suit. We call for your support so that Palestine become a full-fledged member of the United Nations. We have already recognized the right of Israel to existence in 1988 and in 1993, and we still recognize the state of Israel. In this vein, I would like to thank France, Britain, Canada, Australia, and Belgium, in addition to Portugal, Luxembourg, San Marino, and Andorra, and other countries that have been mentioned by His Excellency, the President of France. And we recall with appreciation all 149 countries who have already recognized the state of Palestine earlier. They have participated in our long struggle, the last of which was Spain, Ireland, Norway, Slovenia, and Armenia. We would also like to commend the important role of the presidency of this conference, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and France, as well as Britain, in galvanizing more international recognition. We'd also like to thank all participating countries in this conference for their important role, issuing the New York Declaration and taking irreversible steps to bring about durable peace based on the two-state solution and based on international legitimacy. We would also like to commend the role of the brotherly and friendly countries that support our Palestinian cause in the international fora. We would like to commend in particular the role of Algeria, which is assuming the Arab seat in the Security Council. We commend the positions of the peoples and organizations that support the legitimate rights of the Palestinian people to freedom, independence, and statehood. We reject any confusion, I repeat, any confusion between the solidarity with the Palestinian cause and the issue of anti-Semitism. We reject the latter, proceeding from our values and principles. We would also like to express our readiness to work with the US President Donald Trump, with Saudi Arabia, France, and the United Nations and all partners to implement the peace plan adopted during this conference within a specific timetable with international guarantees and monitoring. This would open the gates towards a just peace and comprehensive regional cooperation. In this regard, I call upon Israel to immediately sit on the negotiating table, to put an end to this bloodshed and bring about just and comprehensive peace. And I address the Israeli people saying, our future and yours banks on peace. Enough violence and war. Our generations deserve to enjoy freedom and security. Let the people in our region live in durable peace and good neighborliness. And I would like to seize this opportunity to address all the Jews in the world, wishing them a good new year. And to our patient Palestinian people in their homeland and everywhere, I would like to tell you that the dawn of freedom and liberty is coming, no doubt. That day, ladies and gentlemen, is the day of the state of Palestine and the start of the peace process in the Middle East. We hope that we will call very soon to an international conference that will bring about this matter. Peace and blessings of God be upon you.
Je remercie le président.
I thank the President of the State of Palestine. Excellencies, distinguished representatives, before suspending the formal proceedings of the conference,
international law and principles and values of the United Nations charters that do not
Must immediately facilitate the full, rapid, safe, and unhindered entry and delivery of humanitarian assistance to all Palestinian civilians. Hamas must immediately and unconditionally release all remaining hostages. But the horrors of Gaza make equally clear that we cannot allow such devastation to happen again. While the situation in Gaza is unacceptable, settlement expansions and demolitions in the occupied West Bank, including East Jerusalem, are eroding any prospects for a political solution. The decade-long Israeli-Palestinian conflict cannot be resolved by endless war, permanent occupation, and recurrent terror. The only way to ensure that future generations of both Palestinians and Israelis can live in peace, security, and dignity is the two-state solution. As the Secretary General said, it's a right, not a reward, to live in your own state, as all humans around the world. We know that some think this is naive. The first resolution on this matter is almost as old as this organization. 78 years ago, the General Assembly adopted Resolution 181, laying the foundation for two states, knowing it's the only way for peace. And to those of you who argue now, but we have tried for decades and failed over and over again, there can be only one answer. If we would stop aiming for what is right because we have not succeeded yet, then evil would prevail. That would be the end of this institution. This institution which promised to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war. It would erode the UN's foundational mission to achieve peace, justice, and equal rights for both Israelis and Palestinians. Excellencies, that is what today's conference and the New York Declaration are so crucial. The message we are sending today is no, we are not giving up. The international community does not only remain committed to the two-state solution, we are also identifying tangible, time-bound, and irreversible steps for its realization. And we are willing to take decisive measures and provide international guarantees. Of course, this conference and the New York Declaration will face criticism. Some will say a piece of paper cannot change realities on the ground for Palestinians. Others will dismiss the vision of two states outright. But the fact remains. The New York Declaration was endorsed by 142 member states. And this majority clearly says the war in Gaza must end now. It condemns the attacks committed by Hamas against civilians on 7th of October. It condemns the attacks by Israel against civilians and civilian infrastructure in Gaza. It calls on Hamas to end its rule in Gaza and hand over its weapons. A sovereign and viable state of Palestine needs to be established, living side by side with the state of Israel in peace and security, with mutually recognized borders and full regional integration. Excellencies, the call for peace and the two-state solution is not an abstract. Not for the children watching missiles destroy their school. Not for the families waiting for news that their sons and daughters might be released from captivity. Not for the UN staff in Gaza who have witnessed their colleagues shot. Not for those who have been injured or maimed and will have to live with the trauma of this conflict for the rest of their life. It's an aspiration, but it's also an obligation. We owe it to the memory of Fint, Kriya, and Ariel, and the many, many others. And we owe it to the children like Rimas, Enas, and Rital, and all the children of Palestine and all the children of Israel, hoping for a better tomorrow, so that they may not inherit rubble, grief, and despair, but safety, dignity, and hope to live one day in peace, side by side.
Je remercie Madame.
I thank the President of the General Assembly. I now invite His Excellency Mahmoud Abbas, President of the State of Palestine, to deliver a statement via video conference.
Thank you. Your Excellency, President Emmanuel Macron, Your Royal Highness, Prince Mohammed bin Salman Al Saud, Your Highness Prince Saud Faisal bin Farhan, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Your Excellency Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General of the United Nations, distinguished leaders and heads of delegations, peace, mercy, and blessings of God be upon you. On behalf of the State of Palestine, I would like to express my deepest appreciation for the co-presidency, the United Nations, and all participating states for the historic New York Declaration that was issued during July's conference and adopted by the General Assembly by an overwhelming majority. It marked the beginning of an irreversible path towards ending the humanitarian catastrophe and ending occupation, legitimacy, and the Arab Conference. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we would like to commend the Egyptian-Qatari-US mediation that tries to put an end to this war. We also commend the positions of Egypt and Jordan, who reject the displacement of Palestinians, a matter rejected by the international community as well. The State of Palestine is the only entity eligible to assume full responsibility for governance and security in Gaza. This comes through an interim administrative committee affiliated to the Palestinian government in the West Bank with Arab and international support and participation. Hamas will have no role in governing. Hamas and other factions must surrender their weapons to the Palestinian Authority. What we want is one unified state without weapons, a state with one law and one legitimate security forces. We stress our condemnation of the occupation's crimes. We also condemn the killing and detention of civilians, including Hamas's actions on October the 7th, 2023. On the other hand, we call for an end to the settlements, the annexation, settlers' terrorism, and the attacks against Islamic and Christian holy sites. We condemn the occupation policies that isolate Jerusalem, Al-Quds, and expand construction on Area E1. We condemn the narrative, the Israeli narrative on Greater Israel, which flouts international law. It represents a direct threat to Arab national security and international peace. This comes in addition to the brutal aggression against the sovereignty of the brotherly state of Qatar and other Arab countries. This necessitates a firm deterrent international stance. Ladies and gentlemen, the State of Palestine continues to adopt a comprehensive